Okay. Uh, so both Vidya and Ashok, I'll just give you a brief idea of how we go about this. I'll speak a little bit about what we will do in class. And usually I do some demos, but I will inform you when to begin so that you can watch the demo fully. And often I will do a demo, but I will also paint again with you and draw again with you step by step so that you don't have to remember anything during a demo. You just need to watch so you know what to expect. That way, when you're drawing it, you are not completely lost about where this whole process is taking you. So give it a couple of times. If you have any questions, if you need me to slow down, please let me know. Because unless you tell me, I kind of just race ahead. I often have a very ambitious plan for the class, but I can always slow down for the slowest person in class. Everyone knows that. And feel free to have a conversation. It's okay to chat. I think Elaine can lead that department. Because the more conversations we have, the more the ideas we can exchange. And painting is just part of it. So while we are painting, we don't have to maintain silence or anything because after all, we're an adults class. We're not like school, so we need to enjoy it that way. Let me go over the materials. Today we'll just be using the pencil, a little bit of watercolor. I wanted to do, so with this, you suggested you wanted to make a lotus. I've shared that image. But tell me something, can we make a graphic of the lotus that's easier and it's more versatile to make on different, in different forms? You can make that into car, excuse me, cards or coasters or even use it as a base for embroideries and things like that. Shall we do that? Then in line with that, then the rest of the flowers that I have shared on the group today, I will be able to show you from starting from some of those flowers, moving into the lotus, and then to more complex flowers like the roses. So let me share the images of the flowers that I have uh, put on the group. So I'm not very familiar with the names of many of these flowers, but that won't matter. Today we are going to make these flowers in a graphic form where we are going to just distill some information about shape and maybe color, a few textures, and recreate this in a style that is simplified, not necessarily very realistic, but reminiscent of the flower that it represents. Here are the lotuses, and I have something that could be like I don't know, it's like a zinnia or something. I'm not sure. So these four flowers are relatively simpler, but then we also can move to roses. And I want to show you how to translate something as seemingly complex as a rose into a simple graphic form and to color it to give it depth and interest. Okay, so we are going to start with these first flowers. These I think these are really tiny flowers, and this picture is a macro of that flower. So this will show you all these little flowers which have five petals, sometimes six petals, and in a uniform orientation will is a good starting point to learn size, shape, direction of line, proportion. So when you are observing anything, one good technique is to break this down into a very simple form, the simplest forms that you can. In many cases, you can break it down into first a circle, and then this circle, sorry. And then you can make this, take the center of the circle, and you can then make petals in the directions of a clock face. So if I make this line going towards the top left, it looks more like 11 o'clock. Then I can make one that goes towards 4 o'clock. So assuming this is 3, this is 4, 5, and 6. 3 o'clock. One is almost 9 o'clock. And the other two are in between. So it's neither 1 o'clock nor 2 o'clock, but somewhere in between. So knowing how to read a clock helps you to at least get some idea of what direction to take the lines in. So this is a good starting point. Now from here, we can always do more, simplify the form even more. Well, it may look complex, but all the shapes that I'm making will help to understand how this can be structured. And the same formula can be used for even more complicated flowers. But in every place, the formula can be different, and you can create your own formula. By no means is this the only way that you can see the simplistic structure in flowers. Now, if we take this V shape between the petals, and I were to draw another circle, very more circular, around the center, we notice that again here there is quite an interesting geometry happening here. From the center, if I draw a line going towards 12 o'clock, a straight vertical line, you have two concentric circles almost at half, right? And then if we want to draw, uh, if we want to draw a V-shaped line, it's easier to draw this V shape between. Okay, I'm sorry about this. The new form has these are some new tools they've made. They're nicer, but I'm still becoming more familiar with them. Okay, so this is how I could make the V shape. And you will notice that the V is similar on in all these valleys. You have one side of the petal coming straight down, but the other side may not necessarily be straight down. There's a little bit of a serration, one edge that has been cut off. The advantage of breaking down all information is that you can then address each line individually. And when you get a certain number of accurate lines, you get an accurate picture. The shape within the petal also is very conveniently within this geometry. It's a 5-pointed star that is within this geometric shape as well. And if I feel I'm not sure where the lowest point over here might be, that too seems to be at half of the distance between the center point and the smaller circle. Now I'm going to share this image with you so that you can refer to the geometric shape. We will draw this geometric shape and then try to draw this flower. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the picture that I've shared with you, you should have it on your phones. So if you want, you can keep your phone and next to you and observe that image while we draw it. We don't make very large images, so just make a small coin-sized circle to start with. I'll be drawing it slightly darker so that it's more visible on your screen, but please make this part very light. So we are approaching that same five petaled flower from the other side. We're first going to make the structure and then we will make the petals in it. Your circle need not be perfect because all these lines can change. Now, make a dot somewhere in the center and draw a vertical line from the center to the top of the circle. Now we have a 12 o'clock position. We can also draw the 9 o'clock position because we have a petal going in that direction. And now you can get an 11 o'clock position. So you draw one line here and continue the same way. Draw a line going towards somewhere between 1 and 2 o'clock. Then 4 o'clock and somewhere between 5 and 6, 6 and 7, sorry. Now, if these lines or these angles are a little off, that's okay. It's not the end of the world. At half point, try drawing a circle. When you're drawing this circle, just look at drawing the circle and don't look at whether or not it is concentric to the outer circle. It may not be, but it's easier to draw smaller circles, more circular than large circles. So let go of this weird shape. And now we can approach the petals. Start with literally one side of the petal at a time. There's this side, then we go to the other side where you have another, almost like a zigzag Z shape. And the petal might go outside of the outer circle as well. Bring it back into the inner circle. Now, it doesn't stop here. This is the entire petal. Right? So this V shape it doesn't end at the inner circle. It just gives, it's just used to measure the approximate area at which the two petals split away from each other. So the whole point of this exercise is to make our eyes familiar with breaking down the complexities in nature to simple shapes. And the same process literally works for drawing. Sorry, I'm sitting in Mahabaleshwar, so my Wi-Fi might be a little dodgy. Please bear with me. Okay, so the last part I was telling you was to justify why we do this such a complicated process to draw a flower. So I would equate this to learning simple arithmetic problems because eventually when you add up those simple problems, you can go to very complex calculations in maths as well. It's the same thing. Okay, so we've got the flower shape, and with each line, you can evaluate whether the line is in the right direction, pointing in the right direction. I'm going to give you a few words to evaluate your work. Since it is all about the line, all you need to do is check if the length of the line is accurate, the direction slash angle is accurate, then proportion slash size with respect to the earlier line that you have drawn and the other lines that you have made. So we have angle, direction, length, proportion, and size. You can just begin with this, and you should be able to evaluate it. Now, here we can convert. Now we can make the 5-pointed star like this, and we arrive at a fairly realistic looking representation of the flower. Now I'm going to redraw this, but very lightly this time, with the same pointers, same circle. And this time I'm going to use my pen to draw the flower. So if you have drawn this in pencil, you need not draw this over again. But we will use the reference to make, yeah. Maybe what we can do is I can show you now how to make a graphic out of this. So I guess you guys can also make another circle. And this time round, instead of tilting the flower, now that we've understood how to translate the flower into simple shapes, let's just start with a circle, a dot in the center, draw a line going towards 12 o'clock from the center, and make a smaller circle inside it. That's it. So just make two concentric circles with the radius marked pointing towards 12 o'clock. Now with this, and we know we wanted 5-pointed, just tilt your flower so that one of the petals is pointing towards 12 o'clock and you get new angles. You get 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock, just over 9 and just over, or say this might be between 9 and 10, and this will be between 3 and 2. On the new circle, we can make these as our guidelines. 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock. You can make the 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock line so that you know how far you want to take. Even 10 o'clock would be good. 2 o'clock is also fine. Okay, is everyone with me? Do you need me to slow down or wait? Okay. Okay, all right. Okay, now I'm going to encourage you to get your pen out. And we are going to convert, we're just going to draw these shapes in pen. Now, in these petals, we had an anomaly. We had one petal going in the wrong direction. But we are going to convert that to a simpler form. Whenever we are making a graphic out of a realistic flower, we try to draw it like a graphic as well. Oops. Okay. Sorry, the lights have just gone. Oh my God.
We can still see. It's okay. Yeah, we
Okay,
can.
okay. So this flashing might happen. Huh? Now to give yourself some, if you want to, just make 5 petal shapes overlapping in these directions. So when you're making the line in pencil, your hand doesn't shake.
So we do that in pencil, not in pen yet, right?
No, do this in pencil, just as a guideline.
Righto.
With this now it becomes easier to draw each petal. Now I'm going to draw one side of each petal first. So I'm going to draw the zigzag shape first. And rotate the book to draw this again. Leave a little bit of a gap in the center. Don't join these lines in the center. Once all five are done, on the other side, you just come down, follow the line of that petal, and connect it to wherever it connects to the next line. Don't overlap, just leave it over there. If you're comfortable with it, you don't even need to rotate your book. A lot of times, people are very comfortable drawing lines in just one direction. If that is the case, then rotating the book helps you to maintain the same curve throughout. Now, see that we have an inverted V shape inside each petal. So we can make that and just make it the same V throughout. Here it will help to rotate the book because what the length you see going up and down, you won't see the same length sideways. And after you've made the whole flower, you will see it differently otherwise. And now you can erase the circle and your guidelines, and you're left with a nice graphic representation of whatever this flower is. So if we want to, we can just color this up. But if you have a thinner pen to make lines with, you can also convert this into just a black and white graphic. So the first pen that I used was a 0.3. And the second one I'm using is a 0.1. And I'm going to first start off with making a line from the center of this V shape towards the center of the circle or the flower. But not joining them in the center. Instantly, that line will create more density in the center, making it look more like the original flower. If you have room for it, you can add more lines coming to the center, one line at a time, and keeping it consistent throughout. You may be able to fit in these 3 lines coming towards the center or not. If it's just one single one, just keep that. And try to make this line very carefully so that the graphic looks respectable. The line should not cross as far as possible, and the spacing should be even. And once these are drawn, then you'll notice that wherever there are these blank spaces, those become spaces of tension. So you can then add extra lines over there only if there is adequate space. And if you don't have space, like I don't have too much space over here, I'm not going to bother. Just leave it that way. All flowers that we see can be converted into some kind of graphic like that. And that's what graphic designers would do. Then you would take this and make it into a motif that can be converted into embroidery or into a block print or into a logo. We move from something like that, from the flower that we have, to something like this, a grid, and then to a graphic representation. All right. The next one that we will do will be the lotus on similar lines, but for a lotus, the structure is not as uniform, and the petals, at least in our reference image, have not been radially equally placed as in the first flower. So I'm going to show you how to do that separately. Any questions, anyone? Okay, all right. If you do come up with questions, however silly, just put them on the chat so that we don't forget and then I can address them later. All right, so here are two samples of lotuses. What I wanted to speak about, the reason why I put two reference images, is that when you are illustrating anything, it's good to have multiple images of the same subject. That way, you have more data required, more than you require, so that you can furnish the details more accurately. Now, for example, in this particular flower, you see the detail of the flower, but not so much the construction of or the structure of the leaves or the buds in connection or with respect to that flower alone. You do not see the center of the flower, so you don't see all the pollen, you don't see that seed pod. So you, when you have this information, it's easier to draw a better flower. Today we are going to just draw this flower, the second one. And in drawing this, I want you to observe a few things. There is a symmetry or an internal geometry to this as well, but it may not be as obvious as we would like it to be. So let's start with just noticing how there seems to be a baseline. So from one petal on the left to the petal on the right, there seems to be some kind of horizontal alignment. Pretty much in the center, you also seem to have a vertical alignment, which divides the flower into at least two identical halves. Some of the petals have just shifted from the halves, and that creates a very nice aesthetic asymmetry. But if you break that down, you notice that again we have flowers that go or petals that go towards some kind of clockwise direction. And they're pretty much in the same size, more or less. So we have something going at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, nothing at 10, something at 11, and then maybe three at between 11 and 12, and one between, so three going towards the 11 o'clock zone. So the initial part of the first flower and this flower, the lotus, is pretty much the same. You identify a shape, a basic shape. In this case, we just worked with lines. Now, you will also see, if you want to, you will see some circular geometry also in this. So maybe instead of a circle, we have an oval. I usually discourage everyone from making an oval because an oval has two axes. It has a vertical and a horizontal axis. So if I ask you to draw an oval, some people will draw an oval that is like this, and some people will draw an oval that is more round. So between, say, I'm going to exaggerate this a little bit. So between a flattish oval and a roundish oval, all your proportions can be thrown off. Okay, just give me a second, please. Right. So when we work with circles and squares and equilateral triangles and lines, there there is no, I guess there is nothing lost in translation or any chance of that happening. So if I need to refer to an oval, I would still break this down further into just maybe halves. So let's say this is your, this is a line, where we have the same radius going to 12 o'clock. Okay. I have no idea what is happening. I'm usually much faster than this. Oh gosh. Okay, so we have
Drawing with
same
this is
axis.
very difficult, these lines.
It is.
Very
So this is
difficult.
going to the left, to the top, and to the right. So it's the same distance. Then we can divide it in half. Again, all this is visually. So you get these petals at half. Let me draw the, oh my God, I don't know what I've done. I'm just going to draw these lines. I think they're pretty self-explanatory. So here we can see the lower petals, where up to what point they come to. And the higher petals, again, I can divide it into thirds. Now, honestly, when I make a drawing, I don't need to go through all these uh, calculations. It looks extremely complicated, but I realized that at least in the beginning, having these like a scaffolding on your drawing at least helps you to visualize all these elements on blank paper. So use whatever you think you need to. Oh my God. Okay. So use whatever of these lines you need to draw the lines that we need to. I'm going to share that image one more time on the group so you have it handy. This time, I'm going to let you all make the flower yourselves. You don't need to look at how I'm making it, because now you know what this whole thing is about. And make the flower about this size in pencil. We can again do the same exercise. We'll first make the flower in pencil like this, and then we will convert it into a graphic. Now, how to convert it to a graphic, that I can show you. So I can show you what parts of the flower you need to distill out. I'm making a circle in such a way that I can draw the second flower also nearby. So here's another thing that we also need to do. I spoke about this last time, that before you touch pencil to paper, try to look at the possibilities. I am first dividing my circle into the vertical line, the diameter into 4 parts. So I've divided in half, quarters, and then the same thing on the side. So I get a very nice grid going. These are the blue lines. And then I have 1/8 in the bottom half and the top half into thirds. This is how our blue line grid looks. These are white. This one is white. And then the white lines that give you directions of the petals. So this is 11 o'clock, a little to the left of 11 and right of 11, 12 o'clock, halfway up to 12, and 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. We have 9 and 3. Then we have something at 8, but coming only up to or less than this bottom point on the left. And all the others are pretty much there. So here the shapes are pretty important. We have the petal in the foreground is rounder, more vertical, going up and then turns in sharply with a little tip and then going towards the right, bulbing up and coming down. Drawing this first petal is the most critical part because this becomes like a unit for your illustration. And everything else then literally springs from there. Not all petals will spring from the bottom. The ones on the left will originate a little higher up on the side of this petal. We have a bulbous line going straight up, turning into a tip, and then coming downward. Another one higher up over here, not as low. Nothing. Then the next one coming to the center. Oh, it doesn't go all the way to the top. I'm sorry. It comes only to this point, not there. Remember, we have the top of the lotus is almost like an oval, half an oval, not the whole circle. So um, don't get confused. Oh, it's bound to get confused. But this entire section is just eliminated. There's no flower part over there. Now, before we draw the petal at 2 o'clock, notice how there's an overlap. And the petal at 3 o'clock has a very interesting shape. Doesn't go all the way to the edge. And it's almost like a cup coming halfway down the side. And the overlapped petal sits inside of this. Using grids for illustration is a very old technique. Everyone from, I think, Da Vinci to, I'm sure at some stage, Picasso and Van Gogh must have used grid for some illustration or another. And here, what we're doing is essentially cheating because they did not use photographs as reference images. That was the whole point of making a painting in the first place. But even if we do have a photograph, the grid technique remains pretty much the same. Are you able to make this? Is it looking okay? Good. Vidyut, how is your lotus looking?
Halfway through.
Halfway
Okay,
through, all right. Okay, I'll just wait for everyone to finish. Take your time, don't rush through this. We have lots of time. Yeah, pinhole camera. Yes, I have seen pictures of pinhole cameras also. And even with the pinhole camera, I think they still use a grid with the pinhole camera. So somewhere, either where the image is reflected, there is some kind of grid. So one advantage of drawing images through a pinhole camera is that you see the images upside down. They're usually inverted. And whenever you invert your reference image, you gain objectivity. Unless, of course, it is an image that doesn't matter whether it's up or down. So if you see landscapes, for example, where the sky becomes the ground, trees become upside down, you can get a certain amount of objectivity. I'll explain about that also a little bit. The ones where turning a picture upside down and sketching it works best is for portraiture. That seems almost counterintuitive because you feel that upside down you will not be able to recognize the features, and drawing it might be more difficult. But there is something about faces that we are so attached to that we can't see past the face for all its features, and we do not see to a greater degree as beginners. And when experts make portraits, they are able to not see the features more than the shapes they represent and the places that they occupy. To come to that point, you should remove all attachment from the subject. So when you turn up a picture upside down, a face upside down, your brain cannot recognize the face. Sometimes it could be your own face. Try it sometime. Just turn the picture upside down, and other than familiar features, you will not be able to see it as who you are. You won't recognize it. But if you try to draw that picture, you can't help but draw only the shapes that you see. And then one shape next to the other shape next to another shape becomes a face, and you turn it the right side up, and surprisingly you get a better likeness of the reference image than if you were to do it right side up. We definitely, when we go into portraiture, we will do this exercise. It is so scary, but on the other side of the exercise, everyone is amazed that something like that is even possible. It's just proof that our brains are probably built by some alien. Okay, so let's try making a graphic now. So now you know the process. It's all about simplification. What line can you simplify and what you can make either uniform, predictable, or aesthetically pleasing. So let's make these same lines again. Vertical center, horizontal center, divide it in half and half, both ways. The bottom half is divided into quarters. It doesn't matter beyond this point. And the top half is divided into 1/3 in the top quarter. This is our center point. Now in this case, we can make petal shapes which are like this. You have one petal shape in the center, and then from the center going towards 11 o'clock, you have another petal shape, another petal shape towards 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. When we are drawing these shapes, freely make the shapes overlap each other. We want to maintain the asymmetric aesthetic, so we are not going to make equal number of petals on all sides. We are also going to change the size of petals as they come lower. And over here, we're going to make a flatter petal. So you can check for that oval shape. And now again using slightly thicker pen, like a 0.3, we can start making these shapes. We will start with the shapes that should be in the foreground. So again, we will make the petal in the center and make it sitting a little sideways, aligned a little sideways. Then over here, we are going to show the petal in two forms. We'll show its folding onto itself. So we will make an oval shape like this, and then a curve along the front edge. And on the right, we can repeat the same, or we can create another shape. So we draw a very gentle curve and reduce this full oval into a small oval like this, almost like a teardrop shape with a tail, and then finish the curve off. So we have created asymmetry within a symmetrical distribution of the petals. Now for the next one, we can repeat this petal, the one that we did at the bottom right, on the left. So a little further away up the top or the side, we can make the shape go up, and then the other side, and create overlap. So I hate that overlaps do not have a corollary, so I call this an underlapping. And we'll end up doing more underlapping in art than overlapping, because the overlapped object is drawn first. Now we can draw something similar on the right, but thankfully, because the human hand does not maintain a robotic perfection, your petals are going to look different, and that's a good thing. Now, as we go higher, we are going to change the size and proportion of the petals. So on the left side, let's make a line go sideways and up, and then make it come round to the center. And on the right side, we are going to make two petals, or at least one petal that's slightly upright, ending closer. And then you have another petal behind it. So normally when people draw a lotus, they would draw the same shape from both sides. As you can see from the left, this petal is like a gentle compound curve. A compound curve is a line that curves in two directions. So it zigs in one and zags in another. It's not a curved line. This is a curved line. So these subtle shapes are often seen in organic objects like flowers, leaves, trees, and they're usually a combination of just exactly this. One curve joining a compound curve. So I'm just adding some more petals in other places, and here is the space is very blank, so I'm going to add a small petal that looks like it is behind the flower, and maybe I can add the same thing over here, but maybe I can add it later. And then from the center, I'm going to draw a line coming down And that should be good. Okay, so was this easy enough to draw?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay,
Few
good.
mistakes, but here's
Okay,
my.
okay, let me
I mean,
just
the
screen
bottom
share
one,
the
there's a
gallery.
mistake, but kind of.
But
See?
no, it's good. I don't see any mistake. Good, very nice.
No, then
Yeah, Jainita's is good also. Only
yeah.
you will know the mistake. And if
Yeah.
you highlight it by erasing it or something, then it'll become even more apparent.
Fancy
Okay.
Ashok.
Oh,
Yeah.
very nice. Ashok's is very good. Lovely.
I find that sometimes instead of using a grid, if you just see the shapes,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know, I guess there's something to be said for each technique, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely. A grid is by no means the only way to go about it. Sometimes, if you just focus on the shape, like you said, and use that shape for all the information you need, the information remains the same. What is the length of a line? What is the placement, direction, size of the curve, orientation? All of that is the
Or using
same.
using the pen to get the angles and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. That also works. Like I said, when I make illustrations now, I don't go about making the whole grid or seeing proportions. But sometimes just knowing the technique helps, especially if you have very complicated flowers. When we come to maybe roses or no,
Yeah,
there are
they are
some complex
showing her.
irises. Yeah, yeah,
Those
yeah.
are really, really tricky, I think.
Nice, Vidya. Your
Very
graphic
nice,
is
Vidya.
good.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.
I guess this grid thing helps a lot for
Yes, for beginners, it's a very big deal.
portraits, when drawing portraits.
Portraits, yeah, portraits definitely it helps.
I don't
In
know, but
portraits, it's a sure shot way of measuring
yeah.
distances. So
Mm.
when we make a grid for portraits, you take your reference image and divide the face in exactly equal parts.
Hmm.
There are, we don't, so there's two ways that I do grids. One is that whole 1 inch by 1 inch or 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. That is necessary so that you get accurate proportions. But in something like the pictures that we draw often, we don't even go with accurate grid. We go with an eyeballing of directions. Like I said, more or less 2 o'clock, more or less 4 o'clock. Because when you face blank paper, you don't know what to draw where. So these kind of grids at least give you a starting point. A circle says, okay, let's make it this size, you know, the containment of your zone. Directions will at least say, okay, now I can start. Once you have got that down, then tweaking the art and the line becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think for making anything into a graphic, that's very useful because you need
Hmm.
some kind of symmetry, but a little bit of, still difference without it
Yes,
being exactly on both sides. But you do need that symmetry for a graphic. Like if I want to embroider this, then I need those definite lines. I don't need any wishy-washy lines in between to
correct.
embroider.
It
So,
helps.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, now for this one, again, we can use a similar technique. We're going to add color now. So first we are going to erase
Can we
these
draw
lines.
the leaf too, please?
A leaf? Okay. Let me compose.
This
Okay, so
lotus leaf
don't
has always been a bugbear. It looks very artificial, just round.
don't erase the circle.
Okay.
Let me just see how we can draw that leaf.
Maybe not that leaf, any stylized graphic lotus
Yeah.
leaf, actually. That's
Yeah, so
all.
the leaf from the first picture is quite beautiful. It's like a frill. So I'll show you how to embellish this part with that frill. But in itself, it might look very boring. So maybe we can do a little bud here, the lotus bud sneaking out from here and a leaf in the backdrop. So I'm going to make this again. I'd like to show you first how I'll do it. You don't have to draw it if you don't want to, but the graphic form of the bud would just be a bulbous teardrop shape which I'm going to divide into just sections, almost like the sections on a pineapple, maybe, but not too many. And then divide this into maybe two parts like this,
Krishna, Krishna.
and give a slightly curved stem over here. So this is how I'll do it. And I want to maintain this circle since we have it already. So in compositions, we try to, or graphic compositions, we try to make use of the bounding box to the best of our abilities. So I wouldn't want to make a bud that's pointing straight when I have a curve that that bud can be aligned with. I'll draw the base sepals like this. And then I can draw, yeah, maybe even like this would be enough. And the leaf is actually just a frilly shape like that. So let it go through the earlier flower, and it's got a center which is usually away from the edges of the leaf in one direction. So I think the leaf of the full leaf would look somewhat like that. You have a flat bottom because this side is foreshortened, it is flopping over towards you. And then you have the circle in the center where the stem of the leaf would attach. And then you would have these lines going in all directions. It's a very beautiful graphic, the leaf. So we're just going to draw that
This is
part.
really simplified it, your lotus, that leaf that you just made. Finally, I mean,
Yeah,
always do it, but it never looked very realistic. This is nice.
it's, yeah. So again, it's just simplifying that shape. Sometimes
Yeah.
we don't see the simple lines.
No.
It's, I guess, the would be the
I don't know why lotus was always so. I mean, I drew, but looked dreadful. This looks very
maybe.
pretty going through the leaf, going through the lotus, huh? The graphic.
Yeah,
Lovely.
but we are going to erase that part. But at least
Yeah.
when you're drawing it, it helps to draw that continuous line.
How would you how would you make like a graphic but with that leaf, that line still going through? It looks very nice. It's like a almost a see-through, like it's on a vellum or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. If
Looks
you
very pretty.
want it that way, you
Yeah.
can always keep that line, and you could color the lotus differently over here. You
Yeah.
could make it a lighter color, or you could make it a combination of pink and green on top of each other.
Right.
It would
Yeah.
still look great.
Yeah. In fact, this pencil and the pen looks lovely too.
It does, yeah. Now the tricky bit is making this circle in pen. So we want to finish the edge. And I've found that in drawing this, a lot of times after you've made it so big, making this circle becomes like a Greek tragedy. Before you know it, that line has gone off. So at this point, what I recommend is clean out your circle and clean out your lines. There will be multiple lines which will confuse you. and use the pencil to make one firm circle around the space that you want. And move your book in all directions so that you get a look at the circle from all directions and it looks pretty okay. If you're comfortable making just one line that resembles a circle, that's good enough. We are not looking at perfection, but I know this is something that we can't avoid. When we made a design in the center and we have to make a circle around it, something goes wrong. Now, in the case of if you want, you don't even have to make a circle. Here's another thing that I often do. If I find this too daunting, I will just make an outline around the graphic image. So I break the circle up and almost make it look like a sticker then. And just draw half of the circle. So this is another option as well. Works wonderfully. You can use an even thicker pen for this outline, so it looks like the edge of a sticker. And then you are not obliged to make a perfect circle anyway. I have realized that when you find yourself at a point where you're faced by your own inadequacy, you can turn that around to make it your own unique style. Of thinking of the inadequacy as something you can't do, think of an alternative that you can do, and then you consistently keep doing that, then that becomes your identity. Okay, now we can erase all the lines and be ready to paint. At this point, please use the flexible eraser. And if you can, if you've drawn lightly enough, roll the flexible eraser on your illustration like a rolling pin instead of abrasing the surface. The flexible eraser it may take a little longer, but it pulls up all the graphite off of your drawing better than abrasing it and really pushing the graphite out. This can be a very peaceful exercise. It does not have to be violent.
Mine is violent, all right. Pressing the eraser like I don't know what. Like atta.
Yeah, but okay. That's very ironic, Elaine. From all the lectures on Buddhist philosophy,
I know.
yeah.
Very violent. I think my eraser's become a little old, so it's very hard.
Like we made these lines in the flower, on the first flower, we can make lines in the lotus as well. So if you notice on the reference image, you have these lines coming down. I'm just showing you in pencil. Don't draw these because we have to paint these. You can draw these lines coming from a point at the tip and going towards the bottom after a little bit of a curved root. And the same thing applies for all the petals like this. These lines are would can be referred to as contour lines, so that they're drawn in such a manner that they give us the impression or the illusion of roundness. It works with petals, it works with leaves, sometimes works with food items. So we can, if you want to make a black and white graphic like the first flower, you can just make these in a thinner pen, and this will create the same roundness. But let's do a paint job on this. And we are going to we're going to paint this in very light colors first, and then using a thinner brush or even color pencils if you want to, you can draw the details. Remember, whenever you draw the details, always start from the center, then half of half, and then half of half, half of that half, and whatever, so on and so forth. Okay, let me show you a sample. If my petal shape is like this, to make the best contour lines on this, I'll first start with the center line. And what we often do is, okay, let me show you what to do and what not to do. Often I have seen people would start in one direction and start making these. So up to half, you're fine. And then either something goes wrong with the distancing, or you don't know how many you should make, and either you leave too much space or uneven space in one side as compared to the other side. But if you try this, just break these spaces with lines. Oh, sorry. Now I can draw two here. I'll have to draw two here. You're in a better position because you can stop at any point where you run out of space rather than committing to a particular distribution of the lines and not fulfilling that towards the end of your graphic. So rather start from the center and start breaking up that space in half and half and half as you go along. Let's try this. I'm going to be using these two brushes. I have a number 7 and a number 1 or 0, and I've used it so much. Oh, it's number 2. I think I'll use a number 1 for the fine line. Yeah, this is 0. So the number 7 brush will be used to make a wash of a very light color first, and then we will make the contour lines. So a little bit of information about guidance to watercolor. We have a range of consistencies. One is a wash consistency where you add a lot of water to the medium, enough for the medium to run very freely on your palette. The manner in which the medium runs on the palette gives you an idea of how it will also run on the paper, how easily it will spread. The thicker the paint, the more controlled the strokes are. The more runny the paint, the less control you have over how the pigment settles on paper. Right now, we're looking at a very runny paint. And the only control we need on the pigment is that it buckles up in the tip area of your petal. You use a brush size about the same size as the size or the area that you need to paint. If we use a 10 or 12 size brush over here, we will have far too much medium in our brush, and we will be left with a very big dome of medium, which takes a long time to dry and might also create puddles. So we have a 7 number brush, and we are going to just put a light glaze of color onto the petal and press the brush down. Take your strokes upward, because whenever you lift the brush, you'll see a little bit of the color gets left behind. And you want to take advantage of that. And you want it left behind in the top section of the petals. It won't be too distinct, But even a little subtle difference between the bottom and the middle of the petal as compared to the tip would be an advantage. Load the brush frequently. Definitely for every petal, you should load the brush. In the beginning, you'll struggle with how much medium is enough. And that's a matter of just adjustment. I can never tell from the online experience how much you should fill up. But the moment you touch your brush to paper, you can gauge whether the brush is gliding easily or whether it is feeling dry. That will indicate how much liquid you need in your brush. If it is gliding too smoothly, but when you lift the brush, it leaves a puddle, that means you can reduce the water a little bit. So understanding how much is enough will take a number of paintings for you to go through. But I'm going to encourage you to go through that process without judging whether or not, or say, let's say, don't not just judge, but don't be disheartened if your watercolor doesn't pay or listen to you too much. Watercolor pigments are like toddlers. They have a very strong mind of their own and they want to do whatever they want to do. You can merely suggest that they do one thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. But the joy that it gives in both cases is the same. So the sooner we learn to embrace the joy, the less frustrating the experience gets. Oh, I forgot to tell you what color I used here. I used a mix of, this was just a mixture of color that I had from previous class. And the shade I used here was scarlet mixed with a little bit of crimson and orange. Okay, now Vidya and Ashok, in
Yeah.
your watercolor kit, there will be a sheet of paper where all the names of the colors are written.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep that sheet and keep it handy because the colors are mentioned according to the sequence in which they are placed in your kit. So you will have lemon yellow, gamboge, orange. It's just 18 colors of which two are black and white, which you don't have to memorize. And the other colors are specific names of the shades so that you know the difference between a cerulean blue and cobalt blue. Each of these colors is like a stainer and it will stain another color to give you one mood or another mood, slightly cooler, slightly warmer, or somewhere in between. So keep it handy till you can remember which is which. And at some point, I'll also show you how a color chart is made. It's very simple. I'll just show you a picture, and if you can make it, then you will know how these colors look on the paper that we are using.
I think
Okay, so
Ashok
right
has
now,
already made one. Sorry.
on the same paper,
I think so. Just ask him to show it to you.
okay.
No, no, that's it. It's just little blobs of the same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly how it should be. It's on the same paper, right? On this book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wonderful.
Why did you say you start? I mean, why were you painting upwards?
Yeah, so the upward painting is only because I wanted that blob of paint
Uh,
to end at the top. Let me demonstrate this once. And I'm going to use a slightly more liquid color. So when you paint with watercolor, you'll see that wherever I lift the brush, there's a blob that gets left behind.
yeah.
So if you leave the blob in at the spot where you want a deeper shade, then it's like a two-in-one. You have stained the areas that you want colored, but you get a slightly deeper shade, almost like a wet-on-wet application without having to make that application. And at the right consistency, the blob will dry right here and give you a very nice, subtle shade difference at no extra effort. Okay, so once that is done, you can use a combination of sap green and a little bit of yellow ochre. That yellow ochre will just tone down the sap green a little bit, and it won't be so aggressive in this picture, since we want to focus on the lotus. Again, it's a gentle wash, and this time you can just stain the paper. Another tip when working with watercolor is don't overwork the watercolor. That makes the pigment very dull. Aim to stain. If the paper is stained, move forward. Make the next stroke next to the previous stain. If you feel that you would rather have had another color or anything differently, do not go back into that area to make any adjustments till the color has dried, because all you land up with are stripes of an even more undesirable effect. Okay, you should all be done by now. Now, taking a little bit of the same color as we made the petals, use a slightly concentrated part so that you can get thicker lines. If you've got only the wash part left, take a little bit of the wash in the corner and add some scarlet and crimson to that to make it slightly thicker and drier. And you can test the line first in another area. If you hold the brush in such a way, one second, I'm going to mute. There's some sound coming from somewhere. Is some drilling going on somewhere? Okay, that's gone. So just test out the line. You just make a line as thin as possible. So hold your brush in such a way that you draw a line behind the brush. So not like this, not perpendicular to the line, but parallel to the line, pulling the line behind itself. Orient your book in the most conducive direction to create these lines. Start from the center. Now these lines you can either paint or you can use color pencils to make. And now follow the curve and break the curve in all these lines in half. Of course, you can choose not to do this also, because if it's too complicated, you can just omit this and your lotus will still look nice. Yeah. And if we do the same to all the petals, it will give you the effect of roundness, desirable contrast, and everything should work well.
कृष्णा तिथे काहीतरी गॅसवरती आहे का?
Okay, since we are already at 12:23, I'm going to request all of you to do this as homework. So take your time, don't rush through it. Practice on a few blank sheets of paper so that you know you're getting the right lines. Okay, a couple of last things to do. Use a cerulean blue wash for the outline over here so that you complete the graphic. It'll look much nicer when it is fully colored rather than keeping a few patches white. And the last bit I want to cover is the rose. Now, there are these two flowers that I would have really liked to do, but let me at least do the rose because that's like a scary monster for everyone. So I'll demonstrate this right now, and then later on when I share the video with you, you can probably pause and watch and recreate the same shapes. I don't want to tax everyone by drawing too fast.
Aditi, your
Yeah.
image is not very clear. Yeah, I mean,
Is it
not the
better
rose,
now?
you're drawing the
Yes,
drawing
yes.
sheet. Sorry, the drawing sheet was not very clear.
Yeah, I'll refocus when I come on to that. Okay, so I want to show you the similarity between this rose and the lotus. Now you'll be able to see that this rose is somewhere between the first flower that we made and the lotus in how the petals are placed. You have some petals pointing downward and some petals pointing up, but you also have the center. So here we start off with again the petals that we see on the periphery of the circle here, then go inward, overlapping, and then we go below again, not overlapping, underlapping. So if you'd like, just keep your brushes down and have a look at how I'll go about this. I'll start off with an oval shape pointing towards the top left. That would be my starting point. This oval we can easily draw based on how we see the rose. It can even be circular. And the center of the flower will be asymmetrical a little bit. My petals will start somewhere over here, and they're all ovals or teardrop shapes. A few petals on the side, but mostly just these shapes. You first start from the foreground. And you keep making these shapes till about halfway. As you go closer and closer to the
It's not,
center,
now, little more in
the shapes of the petals become flatter. And as you come to the center, you can start making the petals from the inside and then going outward. and then turn it.
Aditi, I can't see it. It's very blurred.
Blurred,
Yeah,
yeah.
this
It's still very
Yeah.
blurred. Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, we can't
See,
focus on
yeah.
it.
Okay, I'm trying to not have the shadow come here. Okay. Oh, the connection is unstable.
It's the connection.
Connection, yeah.
Yeah.
Is the
Showing
connection.
low
It
bandwidth
will
on.
it will have recorded properly. Okay, so what I did was I started with these oval shapes along the foreground in the front and then built them up to here. I did not make this part at all. And the moment I came here, I turned my lines around and continued in the center of the rose from where I got a cue to then make petals along the top. After the center is addressed, then I will make more petals, constantly looking at my reference image and change the shape a little bit so that they look more rose-like, even if it is just a graphic. And when I come to this side, again, the ovals are now pointing outward. And they almost become like heart-shaped petals pointing out and down.
Shape you started with in the
Sorry?
center.
An oval, Janita.
Okay.
See, I made a circle. Let me, now in this I'll show you again. I started with the circle, or let's say an oval, and I marked where my center is. And the first petal was here, this one. These two became my first because they're unencumbered by other petals. See, this one and this one. And then you have the next coming above this. And you can grow this to as much as you think you need to. And the best bit is, at one point, if you feel you want to make them more formal, you can just put a wash of color on this as well. I'm going to keep the lines in pencil because the gray line of the pencil also looks very nice. And since we have this peachy color ready, I will create a wash of that and finish it off. So what I have drawn really fast for your benefit, you can draw slowly. So I'm keeping my wash very light. Watercolors will dry up to 30%, 40% even, depending upon the shades you use. Plus, if you press the brush down with just water, you will already have reduced the amount of pigment that adheres to the paper. So those parts will dry even lighter. So these petals in the foreground will easily be lighter, sorry. And then after this has dried, you can always take some additional pigment and make some more marks in the center to create that whole shadow and dark effect. And that's it. So now the application of all this is very important. You can please put all these pictures on cards, on Happy Diwali cards, or start off with bookmarks, gift those out. The more you find uses for all the stuff that we do in class, the more you'll end up doing the art. Okay. Any questions?
No, absolutely okay.
Good. Great. I'll share a picture with you right now, and the video I might share later today. But if it's a little later because I'm staying in Mahabaleshwar, please forgive me. It'll come on Thursday. I'll have more time on Thursday, and I shall upload the video on Thursday then. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Your picture now you're going to share, na? The one in your book.
Picture I'll share right away. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.